Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Franchisers Feed. My guest today is Luke Bazely. He's the CEO and co founder of Driverseat, a shuttle service franchise offering solutions for events, tours, weddings, corporate, shuttles, airports, and many more. So, Driverseat has earned a recognition as Canada's top cost franchisees by The Entrepreneur and operates in both Canada and the US. So, Luke, I am very excited to have you on the podcast because of many reasons. First of all, you're refreshingly transparent about the realities of entrepreneurship and the importance of knowing when to pivot, which of course we'll be diving into in the podcast. B, I'm very keen on knowing how you could scale Drive Seat and why the model itself is very scalable. Why is it a low cost franchise and a highly predictable model? Something we've discussed earlier. And C, I really admire that you have a very sustainable growth within your own franchise brand. And if I may add, haven't met you in person, but I have a sense that you're one of those people who brings a lot of authenticity in everything you do. Anybody I think who's checking out your LinkedIn posts would agree. So I am extremely delighted to have you on the podcast. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Abby. And yeah, I so appreciate the feedback. I work really hard to provide a consistent and authentic, uh, view of who I am and what our company is all about. And yeah, I've been accused of oversharing more than I've been accused of undersharing. So
Oh, I think that's a good problem. As far as your franchisees are concerned, 100%.
yeah, exactly.
So let's go ahead, Luke. Something funny. Let's start with this. So you have an engineering background. What made you step into the franchise space? How did you get into franchising or entrepreneurship in the first place?
Yeah, I guess I would say that. I mean, my to say I have an engineering background, I think would be an overstatement. I studied engineering in school. I graduated with an engineering diploma, and spent a very short few months of my at the start of my career in an engineering capacity, and then started moving into leadership roles and management roles, and kind of never looked back. But I guess what's important to understand about somebody who has an engineering background, who studied engineering, is that the skill set and mindset of an engineer is really to be able to solve problems and to develop unique solutions to things that others might not have thought of, to be able to analyze data and say I can make some assumptions about what's going on here. And I think that background has, or that capability that I have, or that skill set I have, has served me really well in my entrepreneurial journey, because it's allowed me to look at things that are going on in the business and what people might think is a gut instinct, that I go on gut, or that I um, have instincts about things. Oftentimes it's just being able to see what's going on around me, and maybe develop a perspective on what I think is going on. um, so I was always in a leadership management role, and knew very early on that I really wanted to be in control. And I posted about this recently on LinkedIn, that entrepreneurship wasn't an option for me as a kid. Nobody ever spoke to me about business ownership, and what it meant to start something from scratch, or even to own a business at all. It just didn't seem to be an option. And I never really understood people who own businesses. I didn't know what that meant. Um, and so I learned, early on in my career, that that's really the path I wanted to take. And it was really more so to say I wanted to be in control of my own destiny, which I think is the motivator for so many people who start their own company. And so I spent years trying to figure out what that would look like, and spoke with my brother, who was my co-founder in Driverseat, and we spent years kind of ideating on what it could look like and when would be the right time. And in late 2011, I realized that that was the time. I was ready to launch, and so he and I got together. We put our heads together to determine what a business could look like, and that started us on this journey.
Interesting. And did you have anybody that you knew was remotely associated with the transport industry?
Not at all. not at all. We had zero expertise and really no experience, no expertise, and really no contacts in that world. Yeah, we were venturing into it started off as we developed a list of 32 business concepts that we could approach, and none of them really checked all of the boxes, right? That we had set out the criteria for what we wanted out of a business, and so we were trying to figure out of the concepts we had come up with, which one met most of the criteria, and one night I used a service similar to the one we launched in our early days, the designated driver service. I used a service like that and realized that it checked a lot of the boxes. It was highly scalable. It was fragmented. It was a new thing. Most people didn't know about it. It was highly scalable. Had a lot of the attributes of a business model that we were looking for, and that's kind of what launched us into it. So it wasn't that we knew transportation, saw the opportunity in transportation. It was more so that it met all of the criteria we were looking for, and so then we set out to learn, how to build a transportation business.
I agree. It's very scalable and it kind of reflects in the way you operate. You have the B2C space, B2G, and B2B. So that indeed is correct. So I think my next question is very much related to what you said because you did not have an experience per se in the transport industry. And you started as a chauffeur, correct me if I'm wrong, to figure out if the service you're building would actually work. What's your story and what did you figure out once you started off as a chauffeur?
Yeah, well, I mean, when you're starting a business from nothing, you are wearing all of the hats. Finance, admin, HR. You're the chauffeur. And so, and again, we don't really specialize in those services anymore. But when we first launched this idea of driver for hire, this designated driver service, of we were out driving our clients' cars for them. So it was a Friday night, August 31st, 2012. We were launching the service. It was an evening service, designated driver. And so I had a team of chauffeurs lined up ready to go that evening, and I had a wrapped vehicle, and we launched the social media. Back then, we didn't really know much about doing a pre-launch, and we also wanted to keep things uh, kind of under wraps and do this big grand opening on the August 31st, September 1st. And so I went out and just started visiting the bar scene and the restaurant scene and the clubs, and going in and chatting with people and handing out cards, and just saying, hey, if you need to get home tonight safely, here's the card. And so people are like, "Oh, this is great! What a cool service!" And the branding's great. And I said, "Yes." And our chauffeurs are in uniform, and they're going to have a hat on and a name tag, and you're going to be able to recognize who they are when they come pick you up, because that was one of the challenges in this early emerging industry, is the people who were doing the work were not uniformed, they weren't identifiable.
Mhm.
It didn't feel safe for a lot of people, and so we were bringing this whole level of professionalism to a a new kind of industry. And so as I was doing this work, and I'm out running around downtown and visiting different bars and restaurants, what people didn't realize was when they called the number on that business card, they were going to get me on the phone, because I was also the dispatcher. And so I would get a call, and I would stop whatever I was doing, and I would pull over or whatever, and I would take the call and say, yeah, thank you for calling Driverseat, and yes, of course, there'd be somebody available in the next half hour to come get you. And then I would, by phone or text message, dispatch a team to go and pick those people up. And then later on that night, I would follow up with a text or a call to say, hey, how was the service? It was before we were really pushing Google reviews and that kind of thing. So and so that first night launched us, and we did several rides that night, and it was a proof of concept instantaneously to me. It was like, all we have to do is make people aware, do the guerrilla marketing, make sure that we're present and available, and the professional nature of the service is going to speak for itself.
Mhm.
And so I did some of the driving for the first, I would say, 2 or 3 months. After that first night, I really tried to get down to one night a week, where I could be out doing things in the community, and experiencing the service, and learning from it as we went, building policies and procedures as we went. But for the most part, I never looked back, after those first few nights.
That's a wonderful story. I mean, I think some of the industries are very unorganized. And if you can bring some organization, level up the marketing, you
Hmm.
certainly have an edge to stand out. Okay, and you did mention that that was a chauffeur model, and now you've moved to a shuttle model. So, what made you make the pivot? I think there is a lot of learning here for other franchisors to understand, the need to pivot, and stop the old ways of working.
Mm. Yeah, I guess, I mean, we launched a business that we wanted to franchise. So, which it was very unconventional in those days because typically you would have a proven model with three or four or five locations, maybe one location, but you would decide, I understand this business, I understand how to do it well, and now I'm going to franchise it. We built the business to franchise it. And so, as a result, anybody who came into the business in those initial years, they were very much early adopters and they had to be very entrepreneurial, the franchise owners that were coming in, because they were coming into a relatively unproven model. And we had a lot of fun, 2012 to 2015 ish. We were, growing uh, rapidly. People were really wanting to get in at the ground level and understand this business. And when you have a number of franchise partners and then you decide to make this major pivot to the business model, it can be really difficult. I would say that it could have been difficult for us, but I just think we managed it well. We spent time from 2016 to 2019 testing, talking regularly to our franchise partners about what we were doing, what we were learning. We were landing government contracts. We were building out, pretty significant fleet in the corporate location. And they were watching and saying, "What are you doing? And how's this working? And how's the financial model work? And how do we get in on this?" And it was like, "Yeah, we're going to build this out. We're going to spend the money. We're going to take the risk. We're going to teach you how to do this." And so I would say that the launch of our what we call our shuttle business, which is like a charter and shuttle service in vans, was was far more of a proven concept when we launched it as a franchise in 2020. It was far more of a proven concept than the chauffeur model was because we were only months into that model before we franchised it. So we knew through 2016 through to 2019 that this is really where we were going to go because it was a it was a more sustainable model in the sense that you could build a big fleet. It was scalable. You hired full-time people versus these
Yeah.
part-time independent contractors,
Mm.
and it gave us the opportunity to scale revenue up to a much higher level. And so that's essentially what we do now. I would say 95% of our revenue is in this newer shuttle charter market.
I love that you've had a scientific approach throughout. I mean, of course, it's a necessity, but I feel like a lot of founders, they're very much in love with their old ways of working, so it's very hard to stop. And I mean, we are going to talk about it. What is your new strategy? You've completely changed your strategy today. So, of course, I would like to explore that. But before that, Driverseat is a very low cost franchise model. Um, why is it the case? It's low cost yet very scalable. I remember you mentioned in the past that none of the locations that you have hit the maturity or plateaued. So how is that the case?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, what we're finding, first of all, it's a low cost model because you can get started with a lower upfront investment and lower capital expenditure because you can start with one vehicle or two vehicles. And once you've been generating positive cash flow in that vehicle, then you add another vehicle. And when you get those two generating positive cash flow, you get the third vehicle. If you're going to go to the higher occupancy vehicles, buses and things like that, you're generally doing it based on some committed revenue that you've got. So the reality is that your investment is growing with your revenue. And
Mm,
that's different than a traditional bricks and mortar brand where you're doing leasehold improvements, you're buying equipment, you have to do the initial investment is the entire investment up front. Maybe
right.
it's 500, 700,000, $1 million. And then you spend years built growing towards a return on investment.
Mm,
And with Driverseat, you get that return on investment on that first van. And then you start adding another van, and then you get a return on investment on that van, and you move to the next one. So that's what makes it really attractive for people is the fact that you can invest over the course of time. And to answer the sort of second part of your question, in terms of seeing the any individual location hit maturity, we've just been growing since 2019, 2020, since we launched. We've never had a month where we've declined in revenue.
Mm.
When you look at the year prior, and so we will at some point mature on location, but we haven't seen the plateau yet. It just continues to grow.
That's lovely. In one of your, I would like to speak about this, one of your LinkedIn posts, because I do follow, what you share. You mentioned that for a franchisee, there's one control factor, and that's the top line revenue per vehicle. So I believe if, and correct me if I'm wrong, so if a franchisee can control that, then they can accordingly expect the investment they would need to scale. But they need to ace this particular factor to achieve success.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, we look at utilization rate in a given vehicle. So we look at utilization rate at the vehicle level, at the location level, and then at the system wide level.
Mm.
And if we can maintain a certain threshold on the utilization rate, which means out of a 24-hour day, how many hours is a vehicle booked
Right.
or generating revenue? And so the franchise partner has to manage that utilization rate. And there are other things, of course, in running a business that you're monitoring, but the way that our financial modeling works and how we help them set up their pricing structure, how we help them manage their expenses in the business, the financial model becomes extraordinarily predictable. Because
Mm.
if you're running at a 5% utilization rate, you're not making money. But if you're running at a 15% utilization rate, you're doing okay. At 20%, you're making really good margin. And so if you can just manage that, and of course that utilization rate then gets driven by top line revenue, because if you're generating more revenue for the number of vehicles that you have, the utilization rate increases.
Absolutely. Okay, that's very well explained. I think if you can, if somebody can make sense and predict, it makes the job far more easier to choose the brand that they think, there's a lot of potential franchise candidates have this question, how is it justifiable the fees I'm paying to this
Mm-hmm.
franchisor? How am I going to benefit from it? So I think the control factor is definitely present in this particular model.
Absolutely.
Hmm. You've mentioned in the past a lot about hiring, the kind of people that you hire. Can you expand more on the notion of accountability? Because you mentioned that in the past in a franchise
Mm-hmm.
partnership. So, not just the franchise partner, but all the stakeholders that you have in the model.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, accountability is such a core part of our culture. You and I spoke, prior to the interview, we spoke about the idea that we always use the term hold people accountable. And in our company, we realized that you can't actually hold people accountable. They are either accountable or they are not. And so what we want to do is push accountability to the absolute lowest level within the organization that we can. And I don't mean low or high level in terms of,
Mm.
people's competence or sort of downgrading the frontline workers, right? The chauffeurs who are on the road, they're the link between the brand and the client.
Yeah.
And we want the chauffeurs to have accountability for the client experience. We want them to have accountability for safe driving, for the condition of the vehicle when they get into it, and make sure that everything's ready to go before they go pick up a client. If we So we drive accountability where possible to the lowest level, and we do that within the corporate organization, the actual head office, but we also do it with our franchise partners, because this idea of a franchise owner wanting to blame the franchisor for lack of performance, or finding that they go through the fee stage where they feel like they're paying why am I paying all these fees to you, and they go through different stages of evolution as a franchise owner. If we're extraordinarily clear on who's accountable for what, and there's been buy off on that,
Hmm.
then the franchise partner is never unclear on who is responsible for correcting the problem. So if the technology platform that they pay for that we provide doesn't work, we're accountable for that. The franchise partner is not accountable for that. But if they're not generating revenue, it's abundantly clear to the franchise owner that they are accountable for that. And if they
Mm.
have somebody in their organization in a marketing role, the person in that marketing role is accountable for lead generation. The person in the sales role is responsible for the close rate. The person in operations is responsible for utilization rate,
Mhm.
right? And the person in finance is responsible for bottom line net profit. When you can define each of the roles, not only in terms of what are you supposed to do on a daily basis, but more importantly, what are you accountable for, you end up with a deep level of accountability throughout the entire organization and everybody knowing exactly what they need to do to be successful. And look, we're not perfect at it, not by any stretch of the imagination, but this is what we're in the process of shifting the culture to.
I love that. First of all, I love that the way you think. So it's not about holding people accountable, but it's more about the kind of people that you attract. And then once that is done and dusted, also having more structure to the way people prove the accountability, which is having a set of indicators for each level within the franchise system. So interesting. I think you mentioned somewhere that you mentioned it to me that accountability means that you are in control of your results, which is very different from saying accountability means what have you done with X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that's where we struggled with this when we first started implementing. We're on this entrepreneurial operating system journey, EOS, and accountability is a big piece of that. It also happens to be one of our core values, and we used to always say the term hold people accountable. And
Mm,
then it came really clear, and really this year, sometime throughout 2024, we were having a discussion as a leadership team and saying, can you actually hold somebody accountable?
yeah.
Can you can measure results, you can measure KPIs and scorecards, but if somebody isn't achieving what they need to achieve, can you hold them accountable? Well, you can set expectations. You can discuss and agree on what the scorecard should look like. You can discuss and agree on what the KPIs look like. But ultimately, it's on that person to understand, have clarity around what they're accountable for, and then to achieve results. So
Mm,
when you think about, when is it time to exit somebody from a business? Well, there's lots of reasons why in terms of attitude, behavior, culture fit, all these other kind of things. But if somebody's consistently not achieving what they're accountable for, and they're consistently letting the team down, the chances are they're just not an accountable person.
yeah, yeah,
And
absolutely. Yeah, just thinking about it, absolutely. And then the other impact of attracting those people who are not accountable is you lose a lot of time, money, and resources because at the end of the day, it's a constant tug of war. You're trying to reach out to them. On that note, what's the scorecard model at Driver Seat? You openly talk about it, and how does it help? How has it helped you predict results?
oh, great question. So, and again, we are really learning about this every day and getting better at it every day. But the scorecard, if you think about, you know, what a position agreement might look like, traditionally we call this a job description.
Hmm,
We call them position agreements
okay.
because a job description is I'm the owner or I'm the manager or I'm the executive team member and I want you to do this. A position agreement is there's an agreement between us in terms of what you're going to be accountable for. And by virtue of the fact that it's an agreement means that they have bought in to and have taken responsibility for that position. And if they look at that position agreement, they say, I don't think I can deliver on some of these things, then that's a conversation that happens. And it could be a conversation prior to them coming into the business, or it could be a follow-up discussion once somebody's in a role for some period of time saying, hey, I'm struggling with this particular thing that I'm accountable for. Is this a training issue? Is it a competence issue? Is it a clarity issue? And what we do then is we go into a formal issue resolution process to help them figure out what it is. And we might need to either change the position agreement or they may need more training or help. Once we have that agreement in terms of what you're accountable for, the scorecard is a measurement of the activities that they're doing that drive those results. So and it's easiest to explain in a sales role. If a marketing person's job is to generate leads, and we've identified how many leads we need to generate because we understand what our close rate is, which is going to generate this many deals. And if we understand what our deal creation rate is and what our close rate on those deals is, we understand what our revenue funnel looks like. Then the
Absolutely.
marketing person is accountable for this many leads. We could measure how many leads they generated last week, which we do. that's a lagging indicator because now that's what you did last week.
Mm-hmm.
But the question is, what are you doing this week that's going to drive next week's results? And those are some of the things that we also include in a scorecard. So if the job is posting on social media, cold calling, maybe it's cold calling. We don't do a lot of that, but maybe that would be one. Maybe it's attending certain number of events throughout the community. These are activities that we believe are going to drive future lead generation, and we put those on the scorecard. So some of them are lagging what happened last week, but what we're looking for is a majority of them to be leading indicators of what activities are you doing that are driving future results. And we call that a check engine light, because if somebody's falling behind
Mm-hmm.
on the activities that they're doing that we think are going to generate future results,
Right.
we've got to course correct quickly on that. Otherwise, eventually it's going to hit the balance sheet.
Right.
Mhm.
Wow, it's quite structured, I would say, and definitely if you know what have you generated. Let's take an example of marketing. What did you generate? How many leads did you generate last week? How many would you generate next week? And knowing clearly what are the different mediums, I think you can also decipher which of these mediums are paying off for different units that you have.
Yes.
So it's a very
Yeah.
structured approach, and
Well,
I
and the scorecard can change over time, right? It has to be a little bit dynamic because
Mhm.
oftentimes what activities the activities that somebody is doing are driving some opportunity or challenge. So we either have an opportunity to grow somewhere or we have a challenge somewhere that we need to course correct on. But those things may be timely. They may go away. That opportunity may have been, you know, we may have achieved this opportunity, or we may have resolved this challenge, and now we need to modify the scorecard a little bit. And it changes over time to reflect whatever the needs of the business is. But again, it's an agreement. So if the person who's responsible for that scorecard or those items on the scorecard hasn't fully agreed to what those items are, they're not going to engage, and they're not going to hold themselves accountable. And so at all stages, it's an agreement. It's like, we're struggling with this X factor in our business. What is sales doing? What is operations doing? What is finance doing? What are the things that we need to address here? Well, we think if we do X activity more, it will drive better results. Okay, then let's put that on the scorecard. Does everybody agree? And once everybody's agreed and taken accountability for that, now that's your measurement. And so, as an example, in operations, if we had an issue of, we don't have many of these issues, but if we had an issue in operations of safe driving,
Mhm.
we have a team safety score we're measuring, which is a lagging indicator. We know last week how we performed from a safety perspective. But if we had an issue with safety, what activities would we be doing this week to improve the score for next week? And it might be some road audits. It might be some ride-alongs. It might be some coaching sessions with chauffeurs. It might be additional training that's required. And if that's the case, and we know that this is going to take some time, we might put some of those items on the scorecard for the operations manager.
I love that. It's actually a very good model in terms of optimizing your resources and mitigating a lot of things that you might not want to face. How has things been ever since you've implemented the scorecard?
You know what? I think a lot of the work we're doing, we're going to see some pretty significant growth throughout 2025, and we're going to be able to, this is very predictive, we're going to be able to manage that growth and handle the changes in the business far more effectively because we have the system in place. But more imminently, in terms of what's happening right now, I would say the most significant improvement that's been made is just clarity throughout the entire organization. Clarity around what needs to be done, clarity around how the financials look,
Hmm.
what our expectations are and what our goals are. But I guess more selfishly, as the CEO, I'm able to actually now look at scorecards, and it forms a check engine light for me right away. I can look at a franchisee scorecard and say, I can anticipate some challenges coming for this person because they're not managing these KPIs. And so it gives me dashboard level analytics and data that I need to be able to make crucial decisions and fast decisions within the business. And so I would say, for me personally, that is by far the most significant advantage that we've gained through this process. Yeah.
Absolutely. And if it's beneficial for you, it definitely means that the next step is for you to help the franchisees to optimize in whichever department you see an issue. That's great. I
Hmm.
see that a lot of franchisors are unable to help franchisees to this extent. So I think you're doing that. Kudos. When we spoke last time. We were talking about. I asked you a question. I remember. What's your goal like in terms of the number of franchises you would like to open? And you laid more emphasis on unit profitability. So you mentioned, how much turnover you expect a particular unit to achieve, and let's say by 2032. So I think you have a very different approach, and we are kind of pivoting to sustainable growth.
Hmm.
Um, how do you? I want to let the audience know, how do you think about it? Um, why do you have a more sustainable growth as against aggressively pushing for more and more units?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I've been resisting the temptation to follow the trend in franchising, to refer to our success as number of units open. To me, this is a big red herring. It oftentimes, when I talk to other franchisors, when you meet somebody, they say, "Well, how many units have you got?" And my response is always, "I don't know. I do know, but I don't know." Because that's not really the most important figure for me. What I can tell you is, out of all of our locations that are more than 12 months old, they're all cash flow positive. They're all generating profit. And so, well, how many franchise owners do you have? Yeah, is it really relevant? I mean, right now I've got the individual level, an individual franchise partner is making money.
Hmm.
That's what matters to me. And if somebody isn't, we're going all in on scorecard. We're going all in on, coaching and mentoring and training to make sure that we help them and nurture them to get to that point. And so I believe that I will always have this approach in terms of speaking about the success of my business, because I don't measure success by number of partners or number of locations. And frankly, when I look at our 9-year vision, which is what you and I were speaking about last week, is, we have in 2033 we've set this BHAG, right, this big hairy audacious goal to be a $350 million company, system wide.
Right.
That's not a very specific figure in the sense that I will consider it a fail if we don't hit it, but it's giving us that waypoint to work towards. And some of our franchisees at our recent conference said, they were rallying behind this number. They're thinking, okay, what do we need to do to hit this number? And it's exciting now, and now I understand the role that I play in it. And they were saying, how many franchisees do you think it's going to take to get there? And I said, well, that actually depends more on you guys than it does on me, doesn't it? Because if you are growing and you're adding locations and you are owning larger territories and building a much bigger business, uh, let's assume for a second that on an average unit, you could get to $1 million. So I would need 350 of you to do that. But if on average, you as the franchise ownership group, if on average you're going to do 500,000, then I need double that. I need 700 franchise owners to do it. I said, so the goal here is to have, to create incredible opportunities and epic lives means to me, you should want, as a franchise owner in Driverseat, you should have aspirations to build a big business. And that will allow us to minimize the number of partners we need to get there,
Hmm.
and allow each of those partners to be independently wealthy in their own right.
Yes.
And it's not to say that I won't, it's not to say that at 350 owners versus 700 owners, that's a pass fail criteria for me. That's actually got nothing to do with it. So when somebody says, how many units do you have, or how many owners do you have, that's actually irrelevant to me. It's how are we progressing against our goal as a brand,
Hmm.
And right now, and for the last 3 years, Frank, we've exceeded our goal. And the work we're doing in the last 18 months is to completely transform the culture of the business in terms of how we get things done and what we're focused on. If we've been growing every year since, and now we're putting this additional horsepower into it, I have to assume we're going to hit that 9-year target. And at that point in time, I don't know how many locations or how many owners we're going to have. That's not how I'm going to measure success.
I love that. And first of all, thank you for explaining. It was very well structured, I think. You were very well structured as a person. Um, I
Mm,
agree. Also, I think if your current pool of franchisees are being able to scale, that in itself will attract new people come wanting to work with you. So you're not focused there, but it's still going to help you. So I love this approach. And at the end of the day, isn't this the entire way the franchise model should operate? Helping your current pool of franchisees as much as you can, and others will automatically be attracted because they do see that this business model is working, it's scalable, as well as profitable.
hmm hmm Yeah. Yeah, I guess it does really depend on what your vision or mission for the business is,
Yes.
And for me, the reason I do this is to create incredible opportunities and epic lives. It's like when I hear of a franchise partner traveling 6 or 7 times a year and going to these beautiful tropical locations because that's what they love to do. That's evidence to me that we're doing the right thing. And so for me, I could probably build a model that would maximize, just maximize growth, maximize top line revenue, grow it on a hockey stick. And if my goal was to exit to private equity, as an example, and I'm not to say that that's not to say my goal isn't to exit to private equity. I don't know what that exit strategy looks like yet, but at some point I'm going to have to exit this business. If my goal was to maximize my return, then I would be trying to find a way in the most simple way and the most effective and efficient way to grow the number of partners. More franchise agreements, more territories, higher numbers, because that seems to be in the industry what we focus on, right? Is the number of locations, number of owners, number of franchise agreements, number of locations that are sold but unopened.
Right.
These KPIs and metrics, I think, are smoke and mirrors. I don't think they actually represent the success of the brand because if you look at the number of franchise owners who are barely breaking even in North America, the number of franchise owners who are not breaking even, who are losing money, it's an astronomical number. And so here we are at the franchisor level celebrating these numbers
Yeah.
when on the ground, on the street, in these stores and in these homes, in these families, there's people that are struggling because they can't make it work.
Hmm.
And look, we're not going to be perfect. We're not always going to find the best franchise partners. We're not going to make everybody successful. But what's the goal? What's the mission? What's the vision? And for me, if I exit, I'm going to be completely honest with you. If I exited this business at some point in time to private equity and I made a 25% return compared to what I could have if I focused all in on growth and unit number, that's okay for me. As
Yeah.
long as I as long as I achieved my mission of creating epic lives for other people, which means minimizing the number of people that are struggling in my business,
Hmm.
minimizing the number of franchise owners that aren't making it. And so we've kind of got this unofficial commitment to say we will help you to become profitable or we will help you to gracefully exit the business.
Amazing, amazing. I actually, in my previous episode, had a moment to speak with Alicia Miller. She wrote the book Big Money in Franchising and talks about private equity's interest in franchising. And one of the things that she said was private equity firms literally call franchisees to ask them how satisfied they are, what are the
Mm.
profits they are making, and that helps them decipher how good of a franchise brand it is, other than the fact that you have the units. So I think in your case, you're doing that already organically.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, yeah, there are a lot of private equity firms out there. There's a lot of different, sort of, forms that they take or strategies that they have for growth. And some of them really are focused in on sustainability and profitability for the franchise owner, and that is an indicator to them of the strength of the brand. Others are looking for, a 3 to 5 year in and out. They want to go in, invest money, continue to blow up the brand, and get a return on investment. And look, it's different strokes for different folks. I'm not here to judge those private equity firms or the franchisors that do business with them. But for me, that's just not going to be the case. Like when I exit, it still has to line up with my
Hmm.
core values and my mission, which is to create epic lives. So if the franchise owners aren't going to be able to benefit from this new relationship, that won't work for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. A hundred, and there are a lot of cases out there where private equity steps in and the entire system collapses just because it doesn't work for the franchisors, the franchisees, the different stakeholders. So I 100% agree. But I think the thing is that your model is one wherein a franchisee can scale. And if they are the kind of persona that loves to be accountable, has this business acumen, I think this would totally work as a partnership. One of the things that you wrote, which really stuck me, is you love sales because you don't think you're selling, you're presenting an opportunity. I really love this ideology. How has
Mm.
this way of thinking played a role in your own business and franchising and attracting franchisees?
Well, I've been in multiple positions in my company because I was actively running corporate locations for a lot of years, and I was really the business development person in those businesses. And that was my first real, prior to Driverseat, I sold some custom homes, working with another family member in his home building renovation business. And I sold a lot of real estate in 4 years, without knowing anything about real estate or sales. And then I started a company from scratch where I knew nothing about the transportation industry and I had to start selling it. And so the way that I look at it is my successes in sales has really only come from the perspective that uh, I'm not giving anybody anything that they don't want, or that they don't need, or that they're not looking for. And I've been able to tailor my approach to sales and to relationship development and client development in that way. And so some of the large contracts, I mean, I would think in the driver's seat world, if you were to talk to our franchise partners and say who is the best in the driver's seat business at doing business development and sales, some might not say me, but a lot of times they would say Luke is, by far, like when we have a big opportunity to sell something or to generate a big contract, we consult with Luke on how to do that. And it's not because I'm great at sales, it's because I truly believe in
Mm-hmm.
what we do, and I have seen the impact that it has had on our clients, and I have seen the response back and saying, you guys really do live up to what you say you live up to. You really deliver, and I can lean back on that. I can, in a sales role, I can lean back on that and say, I know that what we're delivering is great, and I know that we're delivering it in the best way we possibly can, and I know that our clients love it.
Mm-hmm.
So now in the franchise development world, where I'm selling franchises, and that's where I say I don't really think I'm selling franchises. I'm partnering with people to continue to proliferate and grow the driver's seat brand in their market. And yeah, there's a franchise agreement, and it's I'm the brand governor. It's my business. It's my company. My brand. But they're the ones doing it in their local community. So it's a partnership. And is it an equal partnership? No. Let's not beat around the bush here, right? I talked about this recently this week in some of my content. It's like, yeah, the franchisor has the upper hand, right? Because it's my business, it's my brand, and I structured the franchise agreement, so it is skewed towards me being able to manage the brand effectively. And what I talk to franchise owners about a lot is it's not you necessarily that I'm protecting myself against. When somebody wants to come into the business and they're saying, and I do the franchise agreement review and the FDD review with them. This is all part of the sales process, by the way, because you asked about selling.
Yeah.
And I say to them, look, I'm not looking to protect myself or the brand from you. I think you want to look at this and say, does Luke have the ability to protect the brand from others that may not be aligned?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a franchise owner coming into the business, you want me to have that capability. You want me to be able to protect the brand and hold people, and use this term, hold people accountable, or at least have them hold themselves accountable to the agreement that we've set. And so that's the sales process, because I want them to understand what's in that agreement and what their obligations are, what they're accountable for, and
Right.
what they need to do to grow it. It's a very honest and transparent approach. And my job, I feel like, is almost to do as much talking them out of it as I do talking them into it. Because
Mm.
I'm just frankly not interested in having somebody come in with regrets,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I completely agree. It's more about listening to them, what they want, then gauging if it does match with you. And a lot of people think about sales as, targets, catching the big fish. But I love your approach that you deeply believe from the core that it's an opportunity that you're presenting, and if it's not the right match, you're not afraid to let them go and
Yeah.
move on. Hmm. Absolutely love that. I think this is the reason why I wanted to have you on the podcast today, because you have your core set of philosophy that I see you try to decentralize throughout the company. And I'm just so grateful that I had an opportunity to speak with you today, Luke.
No, it's been awesome. I love doing this. I love talking about franchising and entrepreneurship and leadership. And for what it's worth, Abby, I've done a lot of podcasts, and you're a great interviewer.
Yeah, and just one last request, please keep posting about entrepreneurship. I think it's really inspiring. Me personally, you would be able to make it. I read all your posts, and I think they're really really motivational. So people need it.
I'll keep posting if you keep engaging in them.
I would certainly 100%. All
Awesome.
right,
Thanks so much.
cheers.
All right. Have a good one.